In my last video, I showed you around this £2.99 or roughly $4 camera purchased from a petrol station forecourt, and the device's relatively dubious image quality, although ultimately somewhat expected given the low price point. Towards the end of that video, I said that I was considering doing a teardown of the little device to show you the insides of it, and certainly there was some interest in me doing that. And thus, over the past few days, I have browsed YouTube to see if there are any other teardowns of such a camera, and there are. The first one that I found was from a chap called David Watts, who tore down what looks to be a near identical equivalent of this. But I noted the insides were quite different to the other one of these that myself and Jack purchased and very swiftly tore down back in Yorkshire. David's video is very good, and therefore, had the insides been identical, I would have just sent out his video to people who were wanting to see inside. However, the difference kind of sets the scene for me to produce some slightly unique content. But first, just a little health and safety warning. Even really benign products can present safety risks during teardown, whether it be using sharp objects to gain entry into them, as David found out, or what's contained inside, which can also contain pointed objects and various other hazards. So don't open up anything unless you're well experienced with product teardown and are aware of likely as well as unlikely hazards that may occur and how to mitigate them. With all of that out of the way, let's start the teardown. Now, I would note that I have been inside this before, so it will be a little bit more easy to get into than if you are doing this for the first time. However, I would suggest the best place to start is on the base here, because the back is held on by some clips. So we just put a screwdriver in there. You can see that immediately this is starting to clip off quite well, and certainly moving down here where there are other clips, we can also get in very easily, and you can see that we're basically inside now. Although through opening this before, some of the screw mounts have already broken somewhat, so it's not held in quite as well as it otherwise would be. You can see that there's like a little screw there, and then some on this side as well. But by putting a screwdriver under the side, not only do you unlatch those, but the screws are relatively weak, and so the whole thing just kind of comes together quite easily. The way David showed opening this was a little bit different and possibly less likely to harm the product, but I am not so experienced in teardowns, I suppose. But anyway, we mostly have the device somewhat apart here. There's a little wire trap there, and you can see that we now have the imaging sensor part there just held in by a bit of flex. So if I just take that out, the imaging sensor appears to be held in by bits of plastic melted together, so I'm sure it will be relatively straightforward to extract. Sure enough, with a little bit of prodding with the screwdriver, the camera module itself just comes straight out, and it is really quite small. The back of the sensor unit comes off very easily, again using the screwdriver, and you can see the tiny little sensor there, which only occupies an absolutely tiny proportion of the metal PCB/sensor plate. Helpfully, the instruction manual gives an image sensor of GC0308, which is a 1/6.5 inch 640 by 480 image sensor, and that does look very much like a 1/6.5 sensor to me, because it is just absolutely tiny. Moving on to the rest of the insides, you can see the speaker there and the lithium cell, and these are all attached onto the main PCB by means of sticky material, and that comes off relatively easily off the PCB. I say relatively easily, not particularly easily, and you can see the PCB is actually not a solid rectangle. If we just remove the speaker here, which is very well stuck on, we will then just have the battery attached there, and it's a relatively small lithium cell which does not have any current rating written on it, or any watt hours or voltage or anything, but it is a very, very small cell, and that probably explains why the battery life of this camera is not terrifically amazing. There is a small PCB at the top of the battery though. Having unwrapped the tape around that integrated circuit, it's possible to see that there are a couple of 6-pin integrated circuits on it, and very little on this side apart from where the wires connect to the main PCB. The upper IC in this view is a DW01A, which is a battery protector IC, and the lower one is an 8205A, which is also a battery protection IC. There is not that much to talk about on the rest of the back of the main PCB. There's an 8-pin package without any identification, microphone there, and then some passive components. The other side of the PCB is of more interest. The screen is connected up by PCB flex, so we can very easily disconnect that to remove the screen, and that's all that there really is on this side of the device. And then we get the main PCB with the remainder of its components. There's a bit of sticky foam here, which is very well attached onto the PCB, and then we get some identifying information. Got a oscillator there, the buttons, and then again not actually all that much at all. The 5-pin IC is an LTH7P, search of which brings up a lithium battery charging circuit, which would fit given that it's literally on the other side of the wires that go to the lithium cell. The main IC there is a 24DC MQ0HP491931. A search of brings up no datasheets apart from some forum posts from a Polish electronics forum about a chip in a microscope, but I assume that IC is doing pretty much everything, near enough system on chip for image processing, integrating with storage, and ultimately kind of operating the camera functions. The screen is just a very standard LCD affair. You can see the LEDs there and the relevant components of a standard LCD display, really. Thanks for watching this video showing teardown of this little camera. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on some future videos, which will probably be slightly back to normal telecoms content.